Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to start our new week with a new theme, and this one being death metal. We've had a melodic death metal week a long time ago. That was like week 35 or something like that. It was way early in the channel's life, but we've never actually had a death metal week. And while I think we might delve into some subgenres of the subgenre, we are kicking it off with some proper death metal coming from the band Death, who the genre is named for. Interestingly, we're getting served one off of their last album. I could also say latest, but it feels very weird when I think it came out in 98, which is a while ago. It doesn't feel very as of late. So, let's dive into this and see what Death has to offer with Story to Tell. Ooh, real fun rhythm between the ride and the snare. Yeah. Yeah, so I think we were in a type of 3. I had a real tough time feeling it perfectly. But we're in a 4 now. And you could feel that shift. Yeah, really nice having the quasi-melody there. Oh, yeah, that triplet modulation. Interesting. Yeah, we're back into a 3. Whoa. Although it might even be a 6/8 because our alternating or our accenting pattern is just 4. Yeah, back to 4/4. It's really cool how often we're flipping between the two in a very seamless manner. Oh! Yeah, so we're still in 4/4, but we begin the second half on the and of 4 of the previous bar, so it kind of crosses over. Wait, it's over? Oh, it's not. Is it over? Come on, guys. really interesting direction to take this, given everything feels like it's pushing against the momentum of our drums. Oh, we have our opening idea. Yeah. So that section's definitely in 3. Really cool modulation. I don't know that I picked up on that last time. The drum shifted into something against those palm muted 16ths on the guitar. This is new. Man, that is a very strange end of the bar idea. So you're done now, huh? Alright, so, you know, I try not to dwell on genre too much, because as I've said in the past, it's an interest to me. I think it's really cool just as a classification method, but it isn't too interesting when speaking about what music is doing. However, in this case, because we are doing Death Metal Week, and these are usually my opportunities to hear a selection from a genre, and to, as the week progresses, figure out the elements of the composition, usually. Sometimes it's production value, but usually the composition that stands out to me as something that is replicated throughout all of these, so that I can kind of find some ideas to file away as death metal in my mental filing cabinet, so that when I need to, or when I want to, speak about genre conventions in the future, I can pull this out and be like, oh, they did this and this and this. That's death metal. Let me bring death metal into the topic. And that's why I really like these deep dives into genres, because there's a lot of genres that I just don't understand. And most of them are ones we haven't done week-long dives on. So what I think I need some clarity here, some clarification, I should say, is this traditional death metal? Because I don't want to file this away as death metal when it was too complex for it. And I don't say that to throw shade at death metal. This just feels very proggy in a lot of ways. And I don't want to file away prog death metal in the wrong filing cabinet and misspeak in the future. Not that it's going to be that big of a deal. I misspeak about genres every week, so it'll just be the status quo at that point. But, you know, I'd like to learn eventually. So that's about as far as I'm going to talk about regarding genre. It's just kind of ask for some help and some clarity, because I know this was the end of Death. This was the end of Death. This was their final album. Well, let me just double check this real quick. This was 98, The Sound of Perseverance. Yeah, that was their last album. In totality, they're on some compilations. They do appear on some albums later, tracks of theirs, remixes and stuff like that, it looks like. They have a bunch of live albums after the fact, but this is the final EP or LP that they put together. So this would be the culmination of their experience, and usually bands work up to this, especially when we're looking at older bands like this. Hey, they're from around here. They formed in '84 in Altamont Springs, which I guess makes sense. I can't remember if it's death metal or deathcore that it was largely founded in Central Florida, but something death related is from around my parts of my area of the woods, my part of the wood. What is that phrase? Anyways, they're locals for me. One of those two. But definitely this band is. Altamont Springs is it's a bit of a drive, but it's not too far away from me. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, see their genres, they started as death metal, but they also have tech death and progressive metal as tags on their band profile page thing. So I'm kind of thinking that death metal isn't this proggy, and I just want to make sure, right? You guys let me know in the comments. So, like I said, genre aside, let's dig into what they're doing though. And this was really interesting. I was not expecting this, which makes me enjoy it a little bit more. I was expecting something heavier and flatter, dynamic wise. And volume wise, this song didn't really have too many dynamics. It was pretty much always here. Chordally, emotionally, atmospherically, it was always at the same place. But there's a lot of variety to width, to tone, and to metric concepts. Not so much melodic concepts. We had pretty much two types of riffage going on, but we had a lot of metric ideas. So I don't even know where to start with this. Let's start with the metric ideas. They're the freshest in my head. So of course we start the track off, I think, in a really interesting 3/4. Primarily, it feels interesting not because of anybody playing specifically on the 3/4, but because of what the drums are doing, which I think is accenting 1 on the ride cymbal, and then the and of 2 on the ride cymbal and 3 on the snare. So you get ta, ta ka, ta, ta ka, ta, and it's really disjointed in an interesting way, because it means that our two rests, the pockets between our initial ride and then our ride snare back to back, is going to be a beat and a half and then a beat. So we don't have, it's not symmetric in any way, right? And it's an odd time signature, right? We have an odd pulse. We have 3. You can't really split that in half without working with half beats. So it's already asymmetric, and they push against that with an even further asymmetric rhythm that's built on top of this asymmetric pulse. And that's what makes it feel very odd, because you can make symmetry out of it. You can do 6 eighth notes, which is a hit every half of a beat. 6 is divisible in half, so you can have a pulse of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? And when you put those in groups of 2, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's your division right in half. And you can always count it out as like a 2/4 of 1, 2, 1, 2, right? And that's where you can make symmetry out of asymmetric time signatures. But they push against it even further, and they say, well, if we have an asymmetric time signature, we'll have an asymmetric rhythm on top of that pulse. And that's what makes the opening feel very disorienting. But then, without warning, we have this very cool transition because we go into a 4/4 with a slight tempo decrease. I'm talking maybe 5 to 10 BPMs. It's not a lot, but it's enough to feel the song stretching just ever so slightly and expanding both in pulse and in length, where each bar is not only going to be longer because we're putting another beat in there, but it's also going to be longer because we're playing slower now. And that compounds and just drags it out, even though it's minor things on each, right? We changed from 3 to 4, and then we reduced the tempo by like 5 or 10 BPMs. We're not talking about a lot here, but they do compound on each other, and it stretches it out. It is a really interesting time warp there. We also change the home notes, it sounded like. Something about the general pitch of where our guitar melody was pulled down as well. And if you know anything about music, when you stretch it out, the pitch lowers. When you compress it, the pitch heightens, which is why when you speed up music, you get chipmunk voices, right? And that's actually where autotune comes in because it's a complex calculation that if you're going to adjust the pitch, you also need to adjust the space. Because if you make a note higher, you're doing that by making the length shorter. So autotune's actually a really fascinating program as far as a technical angle. Anyways, I'm getting way off topic though. But yeah, so we have this stretching and the general pitch of what our guitar is doing comes down as well, which just augments that feeling of just being stretched apart, of being slowed down, of being held back, of time distorting. It was just a really cool effect. And, that's one of those cases I talk about really enjoying smooth transitions, right? That's my bread and butter. If you're writing smooth transitions, you're foreshadowing ideas or you're making ideas that flow into each other rather nicely through whatever compositional ideas you have, I'm going to be there for that. But I always talk about artistic intent, and you need to you need to use whatever tools are going to effectively deliver the experience you want. I don't know that this would have worked so well with a smooth transition. Going straight from the 3 and faster tempo and higher pitches into the 4 with lower tempo and slower pitches. Sorry, slower tempo and lower pitches, just back to back, feels like I don't know, like rubber band. Just no, not snap. It would be the opposite of that. If you could imagine the quick speed of a rubber band snapping back together, but in reverse, like just quickly stretching it out, and you don't actually feel the tension or anything while pulling it apart. Um, that was a terrible analogy. Anyways, it's just a very cool effect. I gotta keep going. There's so much more to talk about. Other metric things. I mentioned there at the end in one of the riffs, the guitar does this I think it was pedal note or just a really simple idea, maybe just like 3 notes kind of bouncing around a home tone. And then at the end of it, though, we get the lick, which is these really fast 16th notes, right? And he kind of palm mutes them, which pulls the volume down while also staccatoing them. And we get this really interesting flurry of sound. But while that happens, the drummer shifts from what they were doing because we had, I think, eighth notes on the guitar and eighth notes on the drums. The guitar speeds up into these 16th notes. The drummers speed up into triplets, where they were putting 2 hits per beat. Now they're putting 3. And so we get this cross attack of 3 against 4 polyrhythm going on there, and it just sounds really cool. And of course, they're both moving around. The guitar doesn't just sit on one note. They have this melodic flourish, and the drummer's doing a fill, so we're getting sounds from all over the kit. And it was just a really cool moment. And we see stuff like this all over the track, not necessarily the polyrhythmic stuff, but the whole band shifting into triplets, or the whole band shifting between faster notes to slower notes. consistently. Like they're doing a series of all 16th notes, and then they move to strictly quarter notes, and you really feel that pushback, that metric shift to something slower without changing the tempo of it. This kind of stuff's all over the place, and again, we often have it compounded with time signature, or sorry, time signature changes, where our pulse changes as well, which is going to augment or push against sometimes what we're doing with the metric stuff. So yeah, there's just a lot of time feel shifts going on in here, whether we're changing the tempo, changing the rhythms, changing the time signature, polyrhythmic stuff. It is very proggy in that sense of metric ideas. Now, with all of these metric concepts come riffs, ideas, sections. You can't have, four different time signatures with six different riffs in them and end up with an A B structure. We're going to see something a bit larger in scope as far as different riffs and different sections go. What I thought was interesting was that we seem to have an A, B, C, D, maybe an E. It felt fairly linear for a long time. There might have been a micro loop somewhere in there. I think we heard the B twice, or one of the sections. Anyways, it's tough to keep track of it all. But there was a repetition. But on the whole, it was a lot of unique new ideas back to back. And then we hit the breakdown, or maybe another way, trying to get the engine starting again. Of course, they took this idea of tons of space between ideas and eventually built on it in a sort of slow burn. Instead of making sure that every beat had sound and then building off of that, they went even one step further and said, well, what if we only hit the key tones first? So they, out of an 8 bar or 8 beat phrase, we hit like beat 1 and then like beat 5 and 7 or something like that, and then we fill in the blanks, and then we build on top of that. Like they just took the minimalist structure of the slow burn and went one step further, which is very proggy. I have heard quite a few prog bands do the same thing, although they all came out after '98, I believe. So it's really cool to see that. And of course, it's not like Death came up with it. This goes way back. Lots of genres have explored this concept of space. But where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, we have this middle section. It sounds like they're trying to get the song started again. And we get it going. We introduce our new section that's built on top of this element. And then we cycle back. We hit our A again. And we hit our B again. And we hit our C again. And then we wrapped it up somewhere around there. So it was interesting in that we got a fully linear track, a midway point to say, I don't know, and then repeating what we already had. Uh, I think a generous read is that we'll probably have a lyrical differentiation between these two sets, but musically, I was ready for the song to be over. I thought it was fine when it ended when I had thought it ended. And the slow burn that came from that, are they done? Aren't they done kind of middle section was neat, but I don't really think it added too much to the song other than just being a fun slow burn that starts from even a lower point than most slow burns do. But then to start the song completely over again and run through at least 60-70% of the same stuff. There was one new section, wasn't there? I called it out there at the end. I was like, oh, that's a new part. So it wasn't completely rehash of the first 4 or 5 sections that we heard. We did have a new outro, I think it was on it, but I was kind of done at that point. Well, I'm sorry, I was done before that point. I think this could have been a 4-minute song and I would have been okay with it. Um, but yeah, we do hear a lot of ideas, and I think that's cool. I always love that. I'm a fan of the ABABCB structure, or even I'm getting kind of becoming a fan of the ABABC pattern that we've been seeing a lot in modern releases, especially in the pop world. It works, right? Things become tropes and industry standards because they're effective. And I agree. I like the structure. But also, having a classical background, I love songs that are recursive in different ways. Um, and I'm kind of a big fan of mostly linear writing as well. So it was just a really nice change of pace because we have had a lot of traditional structure or similar to traditional structure on the channel lately. So this was just really cool palette cleanser. With all of this change, though, one thing didn't change. Actually, well, yeah, it's like the main topic and then supporting ideas. Um, the atmosphere. Every section feels the same, and a lot of that comes down to a lack of timbre variety and a lack of key variety. And I try not to take points away from songs because they don't have something that I would like. I think it's better to judge and critique music and all art based on what they do, not really based on what they don't do, unless it's just massive missed opportunities. Um, but I think this kind of tying back into how I was done with the song in the middle, I think this is what lends into it is I was kind of fatigued with the idea. If we had changed emotional resonance, if we had changed keys, if we had changed timbres, if we had gone to an acoustic an acoustic section, um, if we had changed this even riffing styles, something, um, I don't think I would have hit that point of fatigue. But being done with the sound and then realizing we're starting over and doing what we've heard again, I was just like, yep. Again, not a bad thing. If you really dig what they're doing and you want more of it, they deliver. It's just not necessarily my cup of tea. I like a little bit more diversity in the sonic aspects. Now, one thing that really intrigued me here was the vocals. If this wasn't Black Metal Week, I probably would have said something like, sorry, if this wasn't Death Metal Week, I probably would have said something like, oh, this is an interesting mix of death and black. Because the vocals are exactly what I would classify as a classic black metal vocal. They're a bit shrill, a bit nasally. They are closer to the traditional fry scream than the metal growl. Um, and they're very high on compression. They're pointed and narrow. These are all characteristics I attribute to the black metal scream. But this is the band that made death metal. So it really makes me wonder, because we've had some deathcore in the past. We've had death metal through the ages, and I think I've brought this up a couple of times. People are like, nah, man, that's a straight death metal scream. And I'm like, I don't. Are you sure? As if I know. Like I'm any authority on vocal styles, metal vocal styles. Um, but I think this kind of solidifies the fact that A, I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to that, but B, that the death metal shrill and the black metal shrill are probably fairly similar, and that I had an idea about death metal vocals that were not rooted in reality. They were my own perception that was skewed from misinformation or misunderstanding. Though, again, correct me if I'm wrong on this because this is a week for me to figure out what's going on here, and I don't want to say, oh, I had misinformation before, and then cram new misinformation into my knowledge banks. But it did catch me off guard, and it was consistent. It's not like the vocalist had various forms and this was just one of them. This was the general vocals for the track. So, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. The riffage too. Like, okay, so oh yeah, I'm glad I touched on this. First of all, the bass, sick. I could hear it, which is like a huge boost when it comes to metal. Love that. But they also had some neat lines. They did more often than not end up boosting what someone else was doing, filling in the low end for a guitar riff, or filling in a higher pitch for what the bass kick is doing. But there were a few times when the bass got to stand alone, and it has a great tone, and so it does work as that support function to other instruments' main lines. Um, but the bassist did get to show off some chops, not as much as the guitarist, um, but it was just very cool hearing a bass do cool things in metal, especially older metal. I feel like the '90s, especially, '80s, late '80s and '90s is to me when metal went bassless. The 2010s and after is when metal went fretless. Not on the whole, but I feel like fretless basses went just started popping up all over the place in the 2010s. Um, yeah, if anyone wants to quote me on that, go for it. Metal went bassless and then metal went fretless. I don't know. It sounded better in my head. Maybe it was good. I always second guess myself when I make jokes because like I don't. Should I have like an audience laugh track on the sides? Because it's just me laughing at my own stuff. I don't always know if it lands. It lands for me, but I said it because I thought it was funny, so I knew it was gonna land for me. Anyways, we're getting off topic again. Come on, Brian, stick with death. No, stick with life. Let's get back to the death band. The guitar riffs though. This is what I want to talk about aside from the bass because I love talking about the bass and the bass was nice here. The guitar riffs actually had a really nice dance between more melodic flourish and chugging. Really, not really rhythmic stuff, but textural stuff. I thought there was a really nice divide between the two of them. It still has a bit more chugging than I would like, more textural elements. I'm just not a real big fan of that older metal guitar work, but I can't really fault them when they're an older metal band. It's kind of weird. It'd be like me saying, I'd really enjoy this movie from the '50s if it wasn't in black and white. What were they thinking with that? But it's what it was. Like I can't fault them for that, right? It's the sound of metal guitars at the time. It's just it's not my cup of tea. All right, I'm gonna hit some lyrics. And we'll wrap this up. All right, so based on the vocals, it looks like I was close. I was kind of iffy on there actually being an E section, but there wasn't. Verse, refrain, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, right? Um, says instrumental break, guitar solo, guitar solo. And then verse, refrain, pre-chorus, chorus. So A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, F, I suppose, because we did have a different outro. So I was pretty close on that. I'm pretty happy with that, seeing as I was only one off and I was even iffy on adding that. So lyrically, though, this seems to be about relationships and specifically trust. I say relationships, I mean even platonic ones. It's just the way that you interact with people, right? The refrain, I think, is the big thesis. It says, dark skies are beating me down with shadows of deceit, slashing at trust till it forever bleeds. Trust is pain. So basically, had a darkness that was eroding his trust and made him think that trust is pain, and that trusting people was, we can take that metaphor to trusting people is dangerous or harmful or painful, anything like that, which, I mean, it is. You trust somebody, you basically open yourself up and allow someone else to have control over aspects of you. Could be emotional control, mental control, physical control. There's a lot of ways that trust can um, metamorphosize and reality in the ways that we treat each other. The chorus, though, I think the pre-chorus and chorus are interesting. The pre-chorus talks about um, almost like removing not preconceived notions, removing the negative aspects of me in your memory. It says, when you think of me in your mind, try to wash the evil from your mind and open it. And to me, that almost says, I am flawed. You probably remember my flaws more so than anything else, but try to wash that away and open your mind and maybe see me through my own perspective and why I might have made decisions I did, which again kind of leans into this idea of trusting people. And we'll tie that together in a second because the chorus I think is important on this. Says, when you taste the truth, you'll see me like others before me. So again, look at things not just through your own perception, but maybe through mine as well, and try to cleanse this image of me as some completely two-dimensional evil person from your past, and try to give me a more fleshed out part of your memory, right? And he says, to you I am past, I'm just a story to tell. And so whenever you engage in a relationship with someone, platonic, romantic, sexual, whatever, you become a part of their past. And you are now trusting them to be a storyteller for you. And maybe you are nothing but a footnote. Maybe you're barely remembered, or maybe you're not even remembered at all in their history. And that's fine. Not every person you meet has to make a giant impact on you, and vice versa. But if there's any impact, and they plan to tell other people about you, it should be in a three-dimensional light. Nobody, rarely, rarely are people purely good or purely evil. Most people are upon a spectrum. Sometimes they do bad things, sometimes they do great things, but nobody is just one thing. Nobody is just one aspect. And I kind of like this idea. I'm not sure that I am fully in line with every single aspect of the lyrics, but I do think it's a really interesting topic to talk about. And I wonder how personal this is for the lyricists. Interestingly, just to wrap this up, the back half of this track, our second group of ABCD, 75% of it's identical. We get a different verse, but our refrain, pre-chorus, and chorus are all the same. So, yeah, I still stand by the fact that I would have been just fine if we had cut some of this out, some of the repetition out, and made this just a hair bit more linear. But again, that's just me coming at it from someone who's not a big fan of the general sound here. So don't take that as some sort of fact that I'm saying it would be improved if it was shortened. I would just like it a little more. All right, those are my thoughts on Death's story to tell. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you or you'd like to add on to what I said, maybe correct me on? I asked a lot of questions in here for some clarity. Put all of that in the comment section, please. Above that, if you could, head into the description box, find the link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find my music. You can find the Discord server, ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. All right, we have a special selection today. I'll also be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. We'll continue on with this week's theme of death metal and explore another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.